We would like to thank all of our partners, volunteers and National Lottery players who have made this possible. Building Bridges is a National Lottery Heritage funded project supported by Barnsley Museums and Heritage Trust. It aims to develop connections with local community groups and individuals across the village of Elsecar and surrounding areas. With the help of local people, we tell the story of two bridges built at the Milton Ironworks in 1823. The Isle of Bourbon, later renamed La Réunion, was a French colonial territory in the Indian Ocean that produced sugar. The French East India Company used enslaved people to assist with work on plantation land. In 1817, King Louis XVIII banned slavery, however over 50,000 people were enslaved on the island. The bridges made in Elsecar were used for over 40 years. We will never know how many enslaved people erected and used these bridges. This is part of our story. A brief history of iron bridges. In 1781, the first iron bridge completed over the River Severn in Shropshire. Iron could be cast into larger pieces and began to replace wood and stone as materials to build bridges. 1819, the first iron chain suspension bridge was built by Thomas Telford over the Menai Straits in Wales. Mark Brunel. In 1822.
Mark Brunel was a French engineer who ended up sort of settling in Britain. He married a British woman and had a family here. The name Brunel does seem to be sort of synonymous with bridges, particularly suspension bridges, but that's usually kind of Isambard Kingdom Brunel, so the kind of younger Brunel, Mark's son.
The Thames Tunnel used many new techniques developed by Mark Brunel and his son Isambard.
Mark Brunel's most significant innovation was the invention of the tunnelling shield. So this he patented in 1818. It consists of 3 frames, one on top of each other, in a line of 12 for a total of 36 frames, each one the size of a man.
The tunnel became a visitor attraction. Brunel even organised special banquets with music and candles. There were many problems, including floods and finance. The tunnel did not open to the public until 1842.
I think that Mark Brunel's greatest contribution to the Industrial Revolution was undoubtedly the Thames Tunnel. It's fitting that we're sat here today. It's certainly his most lasting legacy. It's still used by 60,000 people a day travelling through it on trains, not at all what Brunel expected. But it's survived almost 200 years now. We're coming up to the 200th anniversary of the start of the project.
I think some people find the kind of engineering work that Mark Brunel was doing as really wondrous in and of itself. You know, the first caisson method to sink into the ground to dig a tunnel, the world's first tunnel under a river, the first tunnelling shield, the kind of engineering outputs and the engineering kind of innovations he came up with were so wondrous in and of themselves.
You can now go in a tunnel under the English Channel. I think that Brunel's legacy really is in showing us that the wondrous is in fact totally possible.
Our story comes to the Milton Ironworks.
Best grade kind of Yorkshire best, as well as usually kind of secondary, kind of what they called number 3 iron, and that was used for kind of just producing pig iron. So yeah, Milton could produce excellent quality iron, and actually the consistency was as much as important as anything. You had to produce consistently good material, otherwise if you were selling it out and your agents were selling it on to other people, if they got a bad batch, then you wouldn't get any further trade.
Some castings can be seen around Elsecar.
And they had the relatively newly installed actual iron works to forge and foundry to be able to cast material and to kind of make it into, in this case, bridge parts. So they had all the equipment here and they could compete on price. So Brunel knew the materials were good and he knew that they could, or hoped that they could do the job. So that's why it came here, I think.
Well, I'm no expert on iron making, but where we are, the area where we are, South Yorkshire, we are rich in ironstone and coal, which is what you need for making iron. I mean, early on, in the early days, it was charcoal, and you can appreciate when something like these furnaces are going, how many trees have got to be chopped down to produce charcoal for iron. And when the development went on and they swapped to coal, well, they couldn't have been in a better area than the Barnsley area. The coal was near the surface, it was easily mined.
The Milton Ironworks dig.
So one thing we found that we really weren't expecting was we found the remains of furnaces at this top level, and as part of that trench we also found layers and layers of made ground which was full of ironworks slag, and it was really concreted, and we think basically what they were doing is they were using the slag from the ironworks to develop areas of the site to put other bits on. Well, we targeted the dig based on geophysics results that Historic England had done for us, and we were hoping we might find some remains of the ironworks. To start with, we opened a trench that went down for metres and went straight through Victorian and early 20th century municipal waste. So this site had been used as a dumping site for a number of years, and we found that actually a lot of the remains are covered in metres of that spoil.
The visit and inspection.
What I do know is that in October 1822, he wrote a letter in French to his oldest friend, a guy that he'd been at school with, to explain that he was sorry that he'd not replied to his letters sooner, but he'd been in the north of England. Given the day, and given that Brunel didn't really work on that many projects in the north of England, unlike his son, it's very likely that that letter refers to a trip to Elsecar, possibly with Claude Navier or with another kind of interested person.
1823.
Also, quite importantly, by 1823, when the thing was nearly done, he wanted to see it erected and tested, because he was being paid, Brunel was being paid by the French government to deliver this contract to send it out to the Indian Ocean, to the overseas territory as it would have been, at the Ile de Bourbon, and so they really needed to see it being tested, and they did quite a lot of tests in 1823.
The bridges were then taken to pieces and transported by canal, then by sail ship to Reunion Island.
But then it was shipped on, we think, a ship called John Barry, which was originally a Whitby-built sort of 500-ton vessel. But it would have been more than one shipment, we think. So actually, it may have been a number of vessels, but John Barry was the main one. And that will have sailed probably in October, November 1823, and sort of set up or unloaded by 1824.
Island of Bourbon, or Ile de la Réunion, was seized by the British during the Napoleonic Wars and was only returned to French sovereignty and control in 1814. That coincides with the restoration of the monarchy in France, at least for the first time before they got rid of them again. And so it makes total sense in that context that the French government would be very interested in kind of developing infrastructure in far-flung colonies in order to bring them into the fold.
The bridges were used for over 30 years but eventually collapsed due to the extreme weather conditions. Building bridges workshops.
The idea of the workshops was for children and young people to understand the history of the bridges and the designing element. So the different types of shapes that you'd need to design a bridge, whether it's a truss bridge or a beam bridge or a suspension bridge. So we worked together, or they worked together in groups to design their own bridges and then build their own bridges with different materials like cardboard. We used engineering materials like screws and screwdrivers and little saws to help the young people to build their own designs.
Is really that they were developing the sugar industry in Reunion. In order to kind of develop the sugar industry, they needed to improve the sort of internal communication, the road systems, and that involved bridges as well. In order to bring the labour in to work the sugar, they needed to connect the towns, because Reunion is basically kind of almost a sort of squished pie shape with lots of rivers going out to the kind of periphery. And so in order to kind of communicate around the island and get from centres of industry to get materials from sugar works out to kind of docks and things for delivery, you do need to improve road communications. So that's one of the reasons really why they wanted to do bridges.
I remember this area where I'm sat being the bottom pond, one of three. I was probably about 6-year-old when it was drained and filled, used as landfill, but it is literally where the Milton Ironworks and Foundry were, what made the famous bridges back in Milton in the day.
So this heritage that we've got there, it does need preserving, because otherwise developers will come along and just snatch it away from us. We need it for our future generations. My granddaughters are here on this building bridge project, so I will be explaining to them, they're only 5, but as they grow older, what the heritage of Elsecar and Milton and Hoyland we've got, and we've got loads of it here. It's a fantastic area for the industrial side, the start of the industrial revolution, you know, on site at Elsecar.